are privileged to have Mr. Derrick Jose from Mindtree Consulting. He's the VP at Mindtree Consulting of the Knowledge Services Group. Derrick has experience of around 20 years in this industry domain. He started his career in Pune, and then he went to join AT&T in US, served there for 6 years, and then came back and joined Mindtree in around 2010. So currently, Derrick's interest area is analytics, retail analytics, business analytics, and how to apply analytics systems in different domains. Say in banking, I saw a model of it in banks, how we can apply analytics in banks. And a lot of you who are from the analytics domain would be really interested in having good questions on that. The unfortunate part is that the seminar is not on analytics because we wanted to have a general perception of leadership over here. So the seminar would be more on how we can move up the value chain. And without taking much of your time, I'll give it to Derrick. So, please welcome Derrick.
To address all of you, it's a topic which I feel very strongly about.
AV blank, check AV.
Of interest to me during my entire career at Mindtree, so I feel very strongly about this. I have only been a practitioner's perspective. I do not know anything else other than what I experienced at Mindtree. So what I'm going to share with you is our successes and failures as we transitioned from a certain service offering and moved up the value chain. So I'll tell you what that path has been. It will be based on actual experiences. I'll take actual case studies and we'll take it from there. So it will be about 40 minutes. I'll cover 9 specific engagements which helped us move to the next level. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer during the session or towards the end of the session. So with that, so essentially cover 2 basic points. So our journey was not by design, it was purely accidental. I'll admit it upfront. We did not think that we had to move up the value chain. Every time we did an engagement, during the engagement, the customer interactions and their needs shaped our offering itself. So it was fairly cooked up on the fly. So I'm just going to talk to you about in a period of 10 years, what are the major transition points which we had. And finally, our own unique perspective of 5 things which we feel are important for a company in order to move from a commoditized offering to the next level value-added offering. So I'll define what it is based on our perspective. So it's completely based on experience. These are based on 9 engagements, and for each engagement I'll share our perspective of what is it that we got rubbed into the organization post that engagement, so that we could replicate those delta skills, as we call it, to get additional offerings. And our perspective is that value chain is a very, it means multiple things to multiple people. We'll share our own definition of what value chain means. And we feel there are multiple paths to reaching there, not necessarily one way of moving up the value chain. So with that, I'll start with the broad set of engagements which shaped our journey. So I belong to the Knowledge Services Group. I'll just give you some background. Knowledge Services is primarily into advanced analytics, offering cross-selling advanced analytics as a service offering to existing Mindtree customers who are predominantly to the IT side. Prior to Knowledge Services formed about 2 years back, and prior to that I was with the Business Intelligence Group within Mindtree. So I'll start with the whole journey as to, we started the BI journey in about 2001. We did a large supply chain repository for a large CPG company there. And then we extended that platform to multiple countries. We replicated this across multiple countries in the European side as well as in the APAC side. And there are certain learnings out of that. Then one very defining engagement for us was the work which we did for the Lloyd's Corporate Bank in London. It was an out-and-out consulting exercise and we were talking really to the business people. For the first time, most of us were speaking to the business side of things. So I'll tell you about the learnings we had from there. And around 2004 time frame, from an IT consulting, we started doing about 50% of business process consulting. We did a large process consulting exercise for a brewery out here. We went across all their processes, measured their as-is KPIs, which they used to track the health of the processes, and define the target states. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And in 2008, essentially, we launched the advanced analytics offering. We started with what is called the market mix modeling, primarily targeting CPG retail customers in the APAC market. And then if we go to 2009, we extended its service offering to Burger King in the US, where we did some unstructured text mining and buzz analytics on opinion platforms. 2009, we did a large exercise for a fuel card company called Right Express, and currently we are doing something for a large European bank in helping them monetize their information service itself and start a new line of business by syndicating that information. So we are involved in the consulting phase itself, conceptualizing the product, testing that product, and taking it to market. And finally, we'll talk about something which we are doing currently again, where we are doing we are running a process at the same time trying to change it using analytics at runtime, and we are paying for every transformation we make to that process. It's a fairly high-end process, so we'll go to it. So this has been a journey. So along each of the steps, I'll talk about what are the mistakes we made and what were the learnings for us. So if you feel there are any questions, please feel free to stop me at any point in time. Does this look okay? I'm going too fast. So our first engagement, as I said, began with one of the largest CPG companies in India. They were into selling detergents, soap, and hair care products. The problem statement was fairly simple. They did not have visibility into all the information regarding the stocks and dispatches at various points in time along the supply chain. The supply chain essentially consisted of a factory where goods were manufactured, a depot where it was kept intermittently and pushed to a stockist, then to the kirana owner, and then to the end consumer. At every point in the supply chain, we wanted to track what came into the entity, what went out of the entity, what stocked in the entity. So they do not have this strong lines of products, across lines of business. A very simple problem. And what we did was our deliverables were we had to study the requirements across the various roles, the brand manager, the supply chain head, the factory folks, the dispatch folks. What is it that they want to see when they come early in the morning, and where can we source that information and push it into the repository? Very fairly straightforward standard IT problem. And this is what we built. So they have this company. So at every point in the supply chain, we have the dispatches, the receipts, in transits, the stocks. All of that was streamed on a daily basis to this central information supply chain hub, as we called it. And that was the exercise which we started off with. So we had no experience in supply chain at all at that point in time. And some of us had prior experience in building repositories earlier. So we used that. And towards the end of it, what we learned was how the supply chain industry is structured in India, what are the nuances of measuring the health of processes in a very data quality issues, the constraints for some emerging country like India. So that kind of rubbed that people, and we knew how to execute an end-to-end life cycle process for information. Those were the two key learnings at that stage. So we used that learning, and then we said, how can we extend this solution to multiple geographies? So we approached their sister concerns, and we said we built a supply chain repository. And during that time, India was ahead of the other countries, at least in terms of this company. So we approached the counterparts and said, we can build you a supply spend platform. So the business problem there was, most of them were sourcing raw materials, let's say for glycerin for soap, and they're sourcing the same glycerol from multiple manufacturers at multiple contract prices. They want to have a consolidated supply repository so that they can negotiate better. So it's a very compelling business problem. So from there we transitioned to the multi-country model. We built a complete APAC model. APAC, all the countries in APAC, supply chain information repository, spends across each country for each product. Similarly, we built it for the European countries also. Now, what was some of the challenges we faced there was when you go across countries, the nomenclature starts changing, the product definition starts changing. What we call brand here is a sub-brand there. So the taxonomy of the product and the way people looked at the product itself within the organization was different. So we spent almost 3 to 4 months doing business workshops, harmonizing various views of what a product is, what attributes of a product are relevant, and essentially build the central view of a product taxonomy for the organization. So we had never ever done this before. So we had a tough time getting people, let's say from China, Singapore, India into a room and say, can you define your product taxonomy for us? And well, they'll go off in different directions and we have no control over them. So one of the key learnings during that stage was we had to bring in experienced people who would kind of make people look in the same direction. We had heard very strong personalities in a single direction. At that point in time, we had a bunch of IT folks trying to define a data model. So that was a big learning for us. So essentially when you extend a solution to a multi-country environment, a lot of these things, skills are required. And again, from a supply chain perspective, we had to cater to requirements on Australia. Australia was an emerged economy, so the supply chain was fairly short. We had the factories, warehouses, and straight it came to the consumer. Whereas in the Indian context, there are a lot of hops in between. And that thing had to cater to both kinds of models, supply chain models. So handling multi-country supply chain models was definitely something which we learned at the end of this exercise. So again, huge learning for us was cross-cultural facilitation skills. We were not at all successful in this, I can tell you that. We spent almost 2 months trying to resolve what a brand and a sub-brand means, because we didn't have the right people there. So that was a big key learning. And of course, many of the folks, business analysts who were involved in the project, had only an India perspective of the supply chain. Not many of them had exposure to advanced economy supply chain. So it took us some time to change our thinking to that thing. So these were the two things which we learned at the end of the exercise. And once we had done a lot of this, we did a lot of multi-country engagements, because at that point in time, we figured out a unique methodology by which we could bring a solution to the market for multi-country implementation. And we did a lot of multi-country implementation. I'm not going into the details. Then we said a lot of people have trouble creating an information strategy itself for the organization. So why don't we offer a unique consulting offering just to get that information strategy right. So that was the time the London-based Lloyds Bank came to us. They were in the corporate banking side, so they were selling some fairly unique products, asset finance, trade, they had even advisory services. So it was almost a bucket of about 17 different lines of business, primarily through acquisitions. And there are about 36 different applications running business process on top of it. So what they said was, the problem statement was very interesting. They had about 600 relationship managers, extremely highly paid individuals. And they spent about 2/3 of their time preparing for a client meeting, because all the information regarding the customer was strewn across all the systems. So they would ping each of these guys and say, tell me what are the last balance, what happened here. Almost 2/3 of expensive time was spent in collating information. And they felt that there was something had to be done about it, and said, why don't you give us a roadmap to consolidate all customer information across multiple systems. So we were talking to the business here. In all the previous engagements, we were talking mostly to the IT folks. And we did a lot of facilitated sessions. One unique challenge here was all of the folks who went for this engagement were less than 30 years old. And we are talking to bankers who are 50+ years old, and they're all whites. And there is a sub 30-year-old, brownish looking, skinny guy standing in front of very strong personalities and saying, can you all agree to this? It just didn't work out at all. So they said, you guys are never going to get this right. I don't think you have the domain experience. A lot of cultural nuances were not there. For almost 2 months we struggled actually. But luckily for us, that guy persisted. After 2 months, he came up with a product taxonomy which was agreed to by all the 17 lines of business. All the 17 lines of business are so happy about it, they actually invited him to be on the board to design the profitability strategy. They only invited him actually. So, I mean, for me it was an eye-opening moment because from the first meeting where body language was extremely different to a stage where we got an invite, it was a huge shift and span of 4 months actually. So it proved to us that we could break some of these mental models if we persist on it. So that was one of the biggest learnings there. And of course, deliverables had to consist of prioritizing requirements across the risk side, the profitability side, and the customer behavior side. So we had to build a repository for that. And I'm not going into details of this. This gives you a landscape about, this is something which we did as a part of the exercise. First thing we had to do was map the entire landscape in terms of what all business processes exist. And we came up with the level 1 business process map, and it was done by a business analyst. And again, the whole harmonization, for example, we had to resolve even the ways of classifying a customer. So marketing defined customer in a certain way, risk classified it in a certain different way, and again, finance had a different view of it. For example, just to give you an example, one group would interact with BBC radio, and for them a customer is BBC radio. Whereas for the finance group, say BBC radio is not a legal entity for me. BBC as a corporation is a legal entity to me. So they had these huge fights, and we had to harmonize both their views as a part of the exercise. So this is one of the challenges. I'll go into a little more details here. Right? For example, you had Shell UK, and they could be ownership with Unilever, different divisions within it, and each of these divisions were interacting with different relationship managers. So one relationship manager is dealing with one set of companies. So we had to model extremely complex inter-organizational relationships and the relationships between that large network within various points within the company. So very, very challenging engagement. They actually had tried to do this almost for 5-6 years and were not successful actually. So we had to show them a POC before they funded the project, and we were able to do that. So this is a huge challenge for us. And biggest learning was, of course, change management. We had to rewire very, very traditional mental models about product, what a product is, what a service is, what a feature is, what a customer type is, stuff like that. And secondly, corporate banking as a domain was completely new to Mindtree as a company. We had done a lot of retail banking, but not corporate banking. And we kind of learned it on the fly there. And that was a crucial transition for us. And then we did a lot of engagements like this for quite some time. A lot of companies came to us and said, resolve a product taxonomy, customer taxonomy, and build a corporate view. And we did this multiple times. We had mastered the art of doing that. And then a large brewery in India came to us and said, so why don't you cut across all our lines of business and tell us, that now that you've done a lot of engagements, tell us, are we measuring the right metrics at all? Okay, and you had to justify it, saying that why you are recommending the additional metric. We had never done this kind of exercise before. It was triggered by the company. We had no offering like that. So we took a chance and we started doing it. So the deliverables consist of actually documenting all the metrics which are measured as a part of the process today and benchmark it with industry best practices. So we have the SCORE model, supply chain operations reference model, against which we benchmark this. And this is the very first benchmarking exercise Mindtree as a company had done. And we were not sure that we would get away with it, to be honest with you. But it worked out very well. And we defined the 2D process metrics. I'm not going into the details of it. So we defined what are some of the best practices with respect to analyzing those metrics. Just to give you an example, so you would say you are doing a brand contribution analysis, these are the key inputs to that, this is what you currently measure, these are the additional KPIs you have to measure, and the rationale for it. This was the template which we used, and we did this across all the sales processes, marketing processes, sourcing, as well as entire supply chain, also the finance group. And the output of this was delivered directly to the CEO, CFO, all of them were sitting in a room. And it was fairly a nervous session because they have been running their processes for almost 15-20 years, and we from the IT going and saying, hey, you should be measuring this. We felt we will not have the credibility. But when we explained the rationale to them, and they asked a lot of very intensive questions, but when we were prepared for it, once we explained this, they were able to kind of understand why we are saying what we are saying. So the grey hat did not count so much in that encounter. And again, we had never understood domain frameworks like, let's say, a CMAP framework for customer metrics or a SCOR framework for supply chain management. So these were two things which we started learning from this exercise, and we again replicated this to multiple customer engagements. Sure.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is of immediate relevance to me, so just thought I'll pose this question now.
Sure.
How did you price for this engagement, where you're coming up with their industry, their specific company-wide KPIs? How did you price for this engagement?
This engagement was completely priced based on K&M model, our traditional standard IT model. So many bodies, X amount of manuals, you have a cost. That's it. Because it's the first engagement, we wanted it as a reference to the customer. So we are even ready to do it at a loss because we wanted that experience. Yeah.
So for the domain, do you actually hire new people from the domain side, or you allow continuing your IT folks and let them gain the domain knowledge? For example, corporate banking. So how do you approach?
So every engagement we had a business analyst who comes with an IT background, who's done an MBA. So he knows the IT side plus the MBA side. The only thing he did was learn fast. Okay.
Can I ask one question? Typically, what I've heard is that big consulting companies, they not only play on the rational part while explaining to the customer or while selling a solution, they also play a lot on the psyche. Where they play with the players from the customer side and try to bring them to a single solution. Okay. Did you have that kind of struggle as well? I mean, along with rational?
It's a very good question because in some of these places we had Accenture who had some high-end consulting folks come in, and we did not have a brand at all. So we are an underdog there. So we felt we had to have a lot more content than a branded players. So we played on to the content itself, the depth of our knowledge. And we said, give us some time, we'll show you what we have, compare it to the Accenture work. We certainly had to do a lot of preparation to displace the disadvantage we had. So we played against the brand using content, I would say.
Essentially, you played to your strength of...
Which is exactly it.
I had a question regarding the score models and what you use to generate analytics.
Correct.
Now, typically this, my observation, because we have used it in a more of a product-centric manner. Now, two challenges I'd essentially like to say is, one is, while you are doing the customization for a company, is pretty fine because you can abstract out the processing. But if we see, observe how much of the score model is actually adapted by the companies, the coverage is not really very positive. So a lot of the processes as defined by score, maybe the company could be 60%. Now the challenge essentially was, how would you templatize this? Because if you were to do a one-to-one assignment, it works ideal because you know the process, you customize this. But if you have to templatize this and productize this model, sell this, so you would not, well, the challenge is essentially have to start back from the start, because what is one of the score model distribution may be very important for this company and it will be not that for the other company. And the other challenge is there are significant variations from 6.0 to 7.0 score model as such. So how would you take those into consideration?
Look at it from a customer's point of view, I would say. From a customer's point of view, he has been running the process the way it is, and anything which you throw at him, which is different from what it is today, it is huge value add to him. So if you say there is an industry blessed framework called SCOR, even if he gets 10% out of it, it's value for him. So you're right in your observation that his processes may be so unique that you may not be able to apply that. Which is it happened here, which is true.
Yeah, that's one of the deficiencies of score model for productization is that not really everybody uses the entire piece of it. So templatizing our score, we had enormous challenges. And second is doing analytics on top of these was even more challenging because the model which you create Now it's essentially different from one customer to another.
Completely.
And then you cannot take this model, and we struggle with the idea of, it works perfectly when you're doing for a customer, but taking that engagement and replicating it for another customer or productizing it was
I think the question boils down to what percentage of commonality can you take across these things. And for certain processes, at least for the process which we saw, finance we could take it across easily. We were able to take some of the supply chain, supplier related this thing. How do you measure a supplier? How do you measure the supplier's quality, etc. We could take it across, irrespective of the process. At the end of the day, he's buying something, like what we do. So some process we could do it. But if you look at it from a customer's perspective, okay, no, if you go and say these are the best metrics you should measure, he wants an industry-blessed thing to give to him. And anything you throw at him is good enough for him at this. So we used it that way. We necessarily did not productize this. I just want to tell you, we did come from a services background. We had a KPI catalog, we had Excel spreadsheet, what are your measures, and these are the gaps. No, we did not productize it. We built it from scratch. So that
did you build on some product or?
Ground up, completely ground up. It was completely ground up, yes. There's not more labor and So that's how, yes.
You talked about process analysis, process management, and you talked about analytics. So nowadays we are seeing a lot of organizations going for adaptive processes. Based on the past performance of the process, they want to adapt or improve the process.
Improve the process, correct.
So how much you are seeing that actual application or tool-based?
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of it because we find that analytics in isolation, if you cannot be sold, it has to be a bundled sell. So it has to be sold in conjunction with running the process itself. So they say, at the end of the day, they say improve the efficiency of the process. They don't care whether you inject analytics or anything behind it. So in a way, we are seeing that becoming mainstream because earlier analytics was sold in isolation, and they're saying, no, I don't care right now. If you can move the needle to the process, that's fine. Whatever you do to change it is fine. We're seeing a lot of, I'll talk in a little more detail about that towards the end of it. So we'll spend some more time on this. So this was a stage where we had a huge transition, say from 2001 to almost 2006, 2007. The number of engagements which transformed us as a company was fairly less because at the end of the day we were herding all the information, bolting a report on top of it. We did not have a process between the repository and the report. We just put data in and streamed it outside. But then the customers started asking us, how do you take us beyond reporting itself? Can you, insert some analytical process in between the repository and the output? And we started thinking about it, and we started our analytics practice at that time. So we targeted one specific process. The process which we targeted at that stage was the process of allocating marketing budgets across the various vehicles. So for example, some of the CPG companies in India itself spends close to about 600 crores every year on buying TV spots, print ads, radio ads, and they have these various promotions, not necessarily knowing how much uplift it has cost to the sales or how much brand recall has been affected by that. So we thought it was a very, very inefficient process and a lot of money going into it. And we thought it was the right candidate for it. We started what we call the market mix modeling as a service offering, where we took standard regression, ran it through data, and quantified the attribution of each of these vehicles. And we did it for multiple companies, extremely effective. So if you go to see the breadth of vehicles you have TV, radio, all flavors of papers, cable advertising. So if you had $100, you had to strew it across all of these buckets. So last year you spent so much, I would spend the same amount of again. Do you know the effectiveness of last year's budget on this year's sales? Are you able to attribute it specifically to that? They were running blind. So we thought this market mix models would help us do that. Essentially the output would look something like this. We'll say this is the impact and this is the incremental impact of each of those initiatives on sales. So, and some of them resulted in reduction itself. So, attribution analysis, as we call it in simple terms, is what we did. And it was a straightforward process. We asked for a standard data set, cracked it through the process, gave this output out. Fairly non-linear, I would say. there's not a lot of labor involved in doing this. Once we do it, we can keep templatizing it and running it again and again. Very, very successful. And again, I'm not going into details on these graphs. We can also quantify the attributions across time. So summertime something worked much better than winter time, stuff like that. So this attribution models were. What are the big learning from us from this engagement? One was, as an IT company, we have always sold to the CIO. We have never ever sold to the chief marketing officer or the. It was a huge change for us actually. This is an inflection point. We never had statisticians on our own before. Statistician never came to us and why we join an IT company. And again, the challenge was sometimes we'll take these complex models and we have to demystify it in simple English to business folks. So these were the three important things, challenges we faced out here. Yes.
Not from the analytics, but what is the fundamental basis on which you say a particular sales, particular ad campaign translated into how much of sales? I mean, just as a layman language, okay, how do you say that? How do you? It's very difficult to imagine what is coming on Star TV, translating into increased number of say conflicts. I can't correlate the two. How do you do it?
So for example, these media ads, the objective was not necessarily to increase their sales itself. Most of it was to increase brand recall. So we used to get those metrics from the media agencies themselves. But the promotions, temporary price reductions, coupons, incentivizing the trader, they were all geared towards increasing this. So not all initiatives were geared towards increasing the sales itself. So there are multiple business objectives. One was some initiatives were primarily focused on increasing brand recall index, as they call it, top of the mind index. Say top of the mind recall. So they'll go talk arbitrarily to a couple of folks and say, do you know these brands? So this Ogilvy and all these guys will go, hand over a survey. Correct.
And they would have something like this.
There will be a metric which comes out of that survey which says this is your brand recall index. Okay. Recall index. Top of the mind. Yeah, top of the mind. So if they say soap, name the top 3 soaps. They'll say Lux, Hammam, and if you're there, that was a business outcome. So in some cases, it was essentially to make sure that your recall value was higher for a brand, not necessarily to improve sales.
Could you by any technique translate them to increase sales, hardcore data on increase sales versus sales?
I'll go into the guts of the market mix part because it involves going to what is called the exploratory data analysis, marking on
Not very technical.
Yeah.
Is it possible? I'm asking.
It is possible. The data is available, provided the data is available. Breadth of data. For example, if you have how much spend was made, what was the start beginning date and start date, if that information is available, and you had before and after sales at a fairly, and if you knew all the competitor effect, he's reducing price, all the peripheral effects, you can fairly accurately model it. For example, if you don't have competitive effects, you can't model it because a lot of things could be happening in isolation. You should have some competitive effects before you can model it. It is possible, yes. So it is not of the stats itself, I think it's the breadth of data you have, I would say. The stats is fairly straightforward, but you should have all the relevant data at the right level of granularity to model the real world. Then you can fit it. So these were the changes as an IT organization we went through. So we had to hire statisticians, demystify to business folk, and primarily sell to business. Extremely difficult. It took us almost a year to figure out how to sell to business, to be honest with you. We never got access for almost 8 months. We'll go and knock on the door, no one gives us access. Mindtree, we had not heard of you. Ogilvy, we had heard of you, right? Accenture, they heard of them. So it took us almost 8 months. And we then flipped around and tried a different thing. We went to the CIOs and said, and again in the US, the budgets were coming down for the CIO organization. So he was desperately trying to find out a way by which he could get additional budgets from the business. And we went and approached him and said, here are some innovative things. We knew the data landscape completely because we were maintaining them and touching them on a daily basis. So here are some things we can bolt on top of it. We educated him. Can you figure out your CMO and get us a 1 hour slot in front of him? That worked wonderfully well. So we used the CIO as a coach to enter the business and that paid out result. But it took us almost 8 to 9 months to understand that fact. And again, we sold a lot of market mix models. We kept on running the same model again and again. And it was time for us to, again, add additional processes.
I asked one question on previous slide. How was your value proposition different from, say, Ogilvy in that case? They come with a very strong, background in advertising and relation with sales.
Correct.
So when you approached as Mindtree,
Correct.
how was your proposition different?
Correct. So in some cases, for example, the level at which you model that whole thing is predicated on getting very, very granular information of sales.
Right.
Okay. Now, and for sometimes what happens to get that information itself, it takes time. And most of what Ogilvy does or what Nielsen does, it does at the summary level. They do a quarter level, month level, the high level, they do it, model it. And to be honest with you, by virtue of the brand, they get away with the explanations. Okay. And we found it as an opportunity. We didn't have a brand, so we had to work extra hard there. So we said, let's and the second thing they do is they make the whole process a black box. Okay. So you will never know what goes on inside the box. So we said, we'll flip this thing and said, we'll make it completely a white box to you. We'll say exactly what is happening each step of the way. Those guys are doing black box, we'll show you exactly what is happening. And thirdly, we said, we'll take more granular information, so the validity of that is good. And we had our IT folks who could go and sniff out everything from SAP, CRM, homegrown, mainframe, So that was a big advantage, and we made it a white box, I would say.
It's a related question on the way you had to change the sales strategy for targeting business rather than IT staff. We had a similar situation. I come from analytics case, and we were building a solution for the pharmaceutical sector. There was significant input that we had to get from our marketing department, where they had to change certain strategies on the marketing side, building certain case studies and then positioning it to the business. But was there a change in your marketing strategy around selling to business rather than IT?
So we did two things there. So first what we said was, we will do a free pilot. All the customers, we offered a free pilot. Yeah. So we said all you have to do is give us these data templates, give us 2 years worth of data. If you can't get the data, we'll invest and get the data out for you. The first objective we said is zero commitment risk from your side. And secondly, we embedded a business analyst on site whose only job was to create an Excel spreadsheet with ROI calculators. Okay. So we got all the metrics regarding the process. So we embedded a couple of IT folks. So we do this free. So we run the process once for them. They look at the outputs. They get addicted to it. So next time we charge them. So that worked in some cases because it was too sticky an output for them, because they experienced it on their data. It's not a theoretical thing. It's not something like that. It is their own data, their own thing. They dug into the details. We showed them everything. The process was built. What they thought was free, but later on we had to charge them for it. So that we worked. But for our people, it was a huge mindset change, because the sales guy will not get the incentive for that quarter. So he was pushing hard for no free POCs, but a lot of push had to come from the top. So free POCs, we'll figure out the commission data. That was a huge thing. Then we had to, essentially then customers started coming and telling us, you're on the market mix models for us. I have a ton of data, figure out something. There must be some opportunity in the data. I don't know the problem is, what the question I need to answer. Go figure out and tell me, what is it that you can surface from this? So, and it should be game changing for us. They said, I don't want anything that doesn't move the needle. So it was a fairly challenging thing. So we started out with Burger King, the Miami-based food. So where we went there, we were maintaining all the SAP applications, the NotNet applications. We knew the complete information landscape head to tail. So first thing we did was get all the information models out, stuck on paper, stuck on the board. And then we got all the business analysts and stats guys into a room, and they kept on hitting at the data for almost 2 to 3 weeks. And they said, here are some 10 or 12 things you could do with the data. And out of the 10 or 12 things, they picked what was called the sentiment analysis, unstructured text mining, and they took price elasticity analysis. So, to give you a perspective, Burger King at that point in time, they said 50% of the revenue came from these millennials. Millennials, the way they defined it, were 13-year-olds who wear baggy trousers, spend more time on internet, SMS, they don't watch TV, that kind of folks. And they'll never respond well to a marketing guy's survey at all. And 50% of the revenues came from them. So, and they said, we feel we are not getting the right information from our market survey. So we're not truly listening. We're paying more than $1 million to run that survey and collate that result, but we feel it's not working for us. And we saw an opportunity in that, and some of the guys went to a website called Yelp.com, where all these guys used to go and blog about their in-store experience regarding Burger King's burger, the product itself or in-store experience. And that source of information was completely untapped. They never listened to that source of information. And the rate at which entries were coming in was growing and growing and growing. So we had a couple of guys who knew unstructured text mining. They pushed a few buttons, sucked the data out, ran it through it, knocked out all the keywords. I'll show you some of the outputs, interesting outputs. What we did was, so they will write all these things on that Yelp.com websites, and we'll take all of this using an ETL tool. At the end of the day, output was this. So you will say post by source. This essentially tells you the ratio of positive sentiments to negative sentiments. It will tell you what is the rate at which posts about you are growing per month. Okay, and it tells you what is the ratio as compared to McDonald's. So this was a completely new spin on measuring the health of your brand on key opinion platforms like Yelp.com, or for India for that matter, Mouthshut.com. And yes, I'll take it.
You modify your normal English and you modify that. Are you using an NLP engine or something for this?
Pardon?
Are you using a natural language processing engine for quantifying some description?
Oracle, no natural. Oracle text miner, ready-made product. You click a few buttons, use nice.
If I write down you got 1,000 questions and write by burgers, go to burgers, how do you read every piece and then give a...
Yeah, so how do you infer sentiments as a positive or negative? That was a manual process in this case. We did not automate the classification of the sentiment.
Basically, every posting is read and then you give
Yeah, every posting was read in this case. In this case, we read it. But the process of, we had tools to exploit that. So there are certain adjectives which we felt reflected positive sentiments. There are certain, basically a watch list of keywords was there. And if that watch list was there, we classified something as positive or negative. Because we felt that some of these products were, it's too expensive, number one. Okay. Extremely expensive, and we felt you can't automate how a guy in a ghetto in New York would say something using an NLP language. He will use a different language to express his sentiment. You can't completely automate how people express their feelings towards a product. So we made it a manual process. We consciously stayed away from that. We said some things can't be automated. We'll eyeball it and do it, and we can do it cheaper in India. Is what we told them. So that's how we did it. Yes. But for them, they had never seen this at all. They had never gone to any website. If they go to a website, they see lots of posts, but they can't synthesize that information.
They could try IIT Bombay to work on this.
Yes.
Sentiment analysis and achievement success.
Yeah.
What are you interested in the AI lab?
If you can,
Only two places in India that we work on. One is language translation at IIT Bombay. One more IIT.
So we were testing out with the product company in California, but they were charging almost $500,000 just for the product, and we'll do it manually. That's fine with us. So this was an output which we got, and you can do some fairly simple things. I mean, we need not even infer the sentiment. For example, we can go to a blog, you push a few buttons in Oracle Text Miner, it will give you a keyword frequency distribution. You say, like this product came, just a histogram of keywords used will tell a lot of story to the business, which they've never seen. And that's useful for us. Simple outputs are very useful for the business itself. So we did a couple of things, and again we came up with the price, measuring the price elasticity. Essentially, they were increasing and decreasing prices for burgers uniformly across all their outlets. They had data regarding the store-wise number of walk-ins that had happened, store-wise what was the price. And we could infer from that information which outlets are price sensitive to increases or decreases. So we said instead of uniformly increasing or decreasing, surgically increase it or decrease it. Some places which are price sensitive, insensitive, for example, don't decrease it. It's lost revenue for you. So that's something which we did for them. Again, the key challenges was again business case creation. Some of the things were very difficult to quantify at all, and even if we quantified, it was questioned heavily. So creating a business case was a huge challenge for some of these things. A lot of soft aspects into it. And again, ability to see the information, you have sales information, you have price information, competitor information. There are certain people who could see possibilities in that, there are certain people who couldn't see possibilities in that. So ability to see different possibilities in the data was something, it's still an art for us, there's no methodology there. And again, there are a lot of very influential people in the marketing group who just did not believe in the online platform itself. They're all 50-year-old plus who said this online stuff is all bugwas, so it doesn't work. Go to traditional market survey. What is a social network? They just couldn't believe it. And it took us 4 or 5 sessions to hammer the same point again and again. I mean, reluctantly too much. So what we found as a pattern is most of the marketing places, at least in the US, were all fairly old people who refuse to believe in the social network stuff. And that's a huge challenge for us when we go this newfangled stuff. And of late, we are getting a lot of requests for what they call, how do I monetize the data itself? In fact, most of the people who have been gathering data for 15, 20 years suddenly want to syndicate that and make money out of it. So they want us to do everything around creating a line of business, how do you structure it, how do you price it, how do you validate it, market research, everything. IT company like us has never done market research at all. And we have asked to do that, so we partnered with a couple of folks to do it. Give me a couple of examples. Easy. So I'll give 3 examples. One is Settlement Bank in London. Almost 80% of the forex transactions go through that hub, and then we babysit their whole processes, which feed in the data and settles it and discusses it. So they came and said, you know the data landscape, and we feel that there are people who will pay for this kind of information, and that's information we had for the last 15, 20 years. Can you figure out a way to make it happen? They were talking to Reuters. A competition for us was Reuters actually. Strangely, we never had Reuters come to us. And Reuters had a very cookie-cutter way of doing things, and they were priced high. So they said, can you figure out an innovative way to do a pilot for us and validate this for us? So we are doing work, as we speak, we are doing work with them. Again, there was another Singapore-based travel portal. It's a standard place where you go and look for airline from to pay price kind of stuff. And over a period of time, they collected a lot of information regarding people's travel behavior. What points, where do they fly to, what points in time, what price do they fly to, etc. etc. They said, can I sell this to airlines? Can I sell this information to airlines? And again, we were babysitting all the data processes, and we figured out one very important scenario out of all of it. One is they had a lot of information regarding which are the places people fly to where you do not appear in the first 3 search lists. So this is a GDS thing, kind of thing. So you go and search from Bangalore to Singapore, price point, this date, click, hit button, and that search request and response was traditionally not stored in the repository. It was flushed out every day because it's not a transaction, it's not a sale transaction. It was information which was being flushed, and suddenly they found airlines would pay a ton of money for that. So we took the search log, sniffed through it and said, let's not flush this anymore. We'll keep it there. And we found a lot of airlines expressing interest in that kind of information. They could create a new offering, or a lot of things they could do with that. A lot of levers they could activate. But that was another interesting change in the kind of service requests which are coming to us. The third is, we are doing again a pilot for a Dutch-based GPS provider called TomTom actually. They hold the largest market share for GPS in Europe. What they essentially told us is they have almost 15 years of information regarding all the cars which travel through Germany and other places. When did they travel, where did they stop, where did they, how long did they stay. That information they wanted to syndicate to 2 people. One is the government agencies them, so they can do better ground planning, condition planning, etc. The second is even these ad agencies, where should they place billboards, they change billboards dynamically. People are willing to pay a lot of money for this. So this was data lying idle, not making money for them. Suddenly we could create a service offering out of it. So a lot of requests, so we have started creating a service offering around information monetization itself as a service, where we do a lot of consulting, there's a bit of market research thrown into it, there's a little of prototyping, platform building, kind of stuff thrown into it. So our role was primarily come up with a consulting offering, partner with demand folks, and again figure out the right questions to ask in a market survey, etc. And platform creation. And this is roughly how it would look like. There's a whole framework how to monetize. So you have a lot of information regarding the various business processes themselves. You have trades, IO swaps, net positions, all this kind of information we are babysitting out here out of Bangalore. And what we felt was we could take this, mash it up together, create an information product, and we could package it, put a skin around it. We could put a research report out of it, we could create an alert out of it. So we could put a nice skin around that core information and content itself. And then of course various stakeholders, there are about large banks which do 80% of the transactions through this bank. So we could sell it to them. They could send a real-time alert costs you so much, a research report with a lot of explanations, and this thing costs you so much. So, and of course, you could price it multiple ways, as you said. You price per consumer, price per information product, price per alert, price per research request, and bundle annual price, or research on demand kind of stuff. So multiple ways in which you could creatively price this, and you could make a ton of money out of this. So this was one important turning point for us. So suddenly business analysts started creating business cases itself, the business model itself, these kinds of documents which you never created in the past. And then people are saying, how do we price for this? You can't do the traditional time and material fixed price, it's underpricing yourselves. What is the right way to price? We still not have figured it out, but we want to offer this service offering, get some credibility before we figure out the pricing. And again, we feel that if we co-invest in the platform, the customer is ready to share some of this revenue with us. So it was upfront investment from our side, and we could share the revenue. So we're talking about run-based revenue sharing models. And finally, this is the last one. Okay. So we're doing work for a bank in the West Coast, which funds a lot of these startups in the clean tech sector, the semiconductor sector, and the vineyards themselves. So they're a very niche provider, and they also serve as the high net worth individuals. So what they wanted to do was, they have a process by which they value they estimate the value of an unlisted company. So fairly complex process, and a lot of subject. It's 50% art, 50% science. But they wanted us to actually do the valuations, and they do the initial consulting, front-ending the customers. So all the back office work will be done for us. For an IT service company like this, we have never done this. We were asking us, should we do it? Should we not do it? But finally figured out the world is going towards owning a particular process, not towards owning an application. And if you control the process, there's more to it. So since the customer is willing to invest in it, and we also invest in it. So right now what we're doing is, as you said, we are running the process. As we are running the process, we have figured out all the inefficiencies, and we are inserting analytics into it to kind of reduce the turnaround time to do that. So this is a huge change for us. Again, I will not go into the details. Okay, this is another example. We have a simple segmentation. In the interest of time, I will not go to each of them. This is a segmentation exercise which we did. Now, only thing I wanted to comment out here was we did the segmentation exercise for the fleet car industry. And we essentially told them 2 or 3 things. Prior to our exercise, they had divided all their fleets on basis of number of vehicles which were there in the fleet and the industry to which they belonged to. So they were carrying oil, it was one industry, they were doing government work, they were one industry. So that was the only way they treated the customers. After this, we said we got behavior-based clusters. So for each behavior, you will have a certain increase or decrease in line of credit. You will have a certain increase or decrease. I mean, the time period at which you bill them will change depending upon the payment behavior. So we are prescriptive to them as to what they should do with respect to each of these segments. So again, an IT company like this, we never knew fleet car industry, let alone US-based fleet car industry. But as I said earlier, a lot of smart folks learning fast and providing common sense, it worked well for them. And if you're able to explain that, that work for us. I think it works. You need not have, see, one of the biggest myths we have to break internally within the company is you need 15 years of experience in fleet cars to exactly tell them what to do. Not necessarily so. Most of the recommendations were done by people who had about 4 to 5 years of experience, but very smart individuals, a lot of common sense, and a lot of math to support it. And we felt that model would work. Of course, we needed a grey-haired guy to front end, but back office all could be done by the junior folks is what we felt. And again, business case creation. So essentially, the key skill which we developed was transformation-based pricing. So we said every time we reduce the turnaround time for valuation, X amount should become, that's the value we provide to you. Again, executing a very, very high-end process like this, valuation of a startup in the energy sector in the US, done by folks out here, it's completely unconventional for us. But we are entering into that territory as we speak. So what were the key things? We stepped back for a moment and we did a post-harvest actually. It was good that before we came to the session, we did a post-harvest. We came up with 4 or 5 things, interesting things. The first change we felt we needed to make internally was, the sales guy used to go in the field and said, tell me your requirements. You need .NET, you need Java, you need SAP, you need mainframe. That to saying, even doesn't have a need, I invest in a BA and create the need. So that selling process had to change. So we had to go and prime the need as opposed to asking for a need. So the whole thing had to change dramatically. One interesting example was a biscuit company, actually, very, very interesting example. They were trying to relaunch a biscuit packet and they were trying to figure out what's the best way to do. So some of the folks in our group suggested that why don't you create a small gaming application which will tell you where you can go and configure your own biscuit. You can say how many biscuits you want, 5, 6, 8. You can tell what shape the biscuit is, circular or rectangular or triangular, rectangular or square. What kind of artwork you want on the cover. So these were the 3 configurations provided. They put it on websites like Cartoon Network and all the places where kids come. And the configuration information, people came and configured various shapes and forms of biscuits. And that information was analyzed to find out which combination of attributes resonated more with kids. And this was something which they never asked us to. Some guy went and sat there, he figured out what is it that they're doing and suddenly popped up with an idea and said, can we try this, or it worked. So I think it's a huge opportunity for many, because if you just go and sit and observe what they're doing, a lot of ideas will get generated. And it requires a mindset which can empathize heavily with the customer, because you have to put yourself under the skin of the customer a lot to do that. IT companies were traditionally not good at that actually. Again, transition from standard T&M model to, so for example, a CPG company, it was an idea they mooted with us, we didn't moot this. They had a forecasting process which was off by about 40%. So everything starts with the forecasting process. If they forecast strong, everything downstream goes strong. So we went and did some tweaks to the process, inserted some statistical techniques. We were able to bring it down to less than 5%. Okay, that resulted in a lot of reduction in days in inventory and non-moving stuff. So they were saying that, can we structure something where we don't pay you for the stats people for X amount of time, or based on the outcome itself. So there had to be a lot of skin in the game. And that's something which we are keenly working on. And again, if you go to see even our own internal SAP system, if you put the drop-down box, it will ask you only 2 questions. T&M, fixed price. There is nothing else. You can't configure any other pricing model. And to tweak that SAP system, you have to game the system. So it's a huge mindset change for us. At least we were the first ones in knowledge services to see, is there any other thing in the drop-down? Nothing worked. So we had to do something in the background to do that. But that's something which is extremely important, we feel. And again, this is a very important point. So traditionally we go and say, can we do 7-8 months project, 10 people, cost you X amount of dollars. We'll create the platform and charge you for a run. So most people don't have CapEx today, but they have OpEx. So we can tap into the operating expenditure and over a period of time build it. So the transition from CapEx-based selling to OpEx-based selling is something which we are heavily working on. Then, yeah, this is the most important thing, transition from selling to IP to selling to business owners. So again, the key learnings there is access to business is very, very important. Earlier, there was only a salesperson, and then the requirements got defined. The sales just handed it over to the delivery team. Now here, the pre-sales team gets integrated upfront. So there's a dedicated pre-sales solutioning team which will go and prime the whole process. And then again, we never asked the question to business as to what keeps you awake at night, what are the top 3 issues and stuff like that. Those kind of questions were never ever asked by the folks. We slowly started getting into that mode where we start asking them those questions. And again, selling process has also got altered. We have started doing a lot of best practice workshops. We do half-day workshops on, let's say, sentiment analysis or behavioral segmentation. What are the others doing? People are curious to know what others are doing. So we do a lot of this free as well as paid half-day workshops to essentially tell them what others are doing. And that results into a pilot, which could be paid at cost, free, or never comfortable with ambiguity. Tell me the scope. The first question used to be, being from an IT company, what is the scope of this? What is the scope of this? Scope is never defined. The customer doesn't know that. I don't know what I don't know is what they used to say. And we were uncomfortable, they were uncomfortable. But the ability to formulate the right questions and sequence it so that you remove the fog around it is a skill which not many people have. And we are consciously building those skills. And again, we are all, I think, trained to answer questions more than to ask questions. And it's a huge change. We found that most people, at least we found our US-based colleagues much better at asking questions than folks from, for example, India-based. They were ready to give answers. You define the question, I will rattle out the answer. But I can't ask a question. I don't know, there's a big difference in mindset there.
We call it provocative selling.
Oops.
That's the industry norm, and that's what we follow. So there is, the sales guys are actually trained in provocative selling techniques, and our training used to be for months on simply provocative selling techniques on VR. Yes.
So interesting. But for Mindtree, this was a completely new thing, at least for the India-based folks. The US-based folks were extremely good at this. So we hired a lot of on-site people because the mindset earlier was hire someone from India, ship him to the US, cost a lot cheaper. But we figured that when you engage with the business, sitting with them with a lot of grey hair, putting a lot of stickies on the board, slowly teasing out the question, and that process itself is a bonding exercise, which you can't, and that's absolutely important. You have to talk things other than work itself. You go out for lunch, you have to talk baseball, you have to talk something else. Our guys are not good at that. They could only talk the supply chain stats. They couldn't have a conversation around other than this. Very important nuances, extremely important for us, we felt, because building that bond helps us a lot downstream. We are getting access to huge kinds of people, and we have to cement a relationship there. And so essentially, these are the 5 levers: needs, from well-defined to priming a latent need. From a process point of view, we felt that we should price from pricing for platforms to pricing for process transformation. That's a huge mindset change. Standard P&L fixed-based models to run-based, pay per report basis or pay per outcome basis. Selling to IT to selling to the CMO, CSO. And of course, the ability to abstract and see the forest from the trees kind of thing. But not many people have it. So these are huge shifts for us, and we're still going through it, but we're building it into our training. The good thing is, this year onwards, into all our boot camps, specifically designed things have been inserted. These are things an IT company never used to do before. But all our boot camps are changing dramatically. And again, in hindsight, I feel that most IT companies can start with an IT application. If you want to go to the next level, the easiest thing to offer is architecture consulting. You say which tool to select. You're still a trusted advisor to CIO. And slowly move into the business consulting area. And then you take ownership of a business and then transform the business. This is a standard template which we feel would work roughly at a high level. So essentially it has taken us 10 years. I think the last 3 years after we started analytics, it has moved really fast. Before the first 7 years were kind of fairly slow. In hindsight, we should have started it earlier. Of course, there were 9 defining engagements. And of course, 5 things which we feel are very, very important. I feel very strongly about this statistics, so I put it in there. So I feel most companies have a lot of capability, and they're all like moths waiting to be butterflies, caterpillars waiting to be butterflies. So they have the seed in them. It is just that a lot of executive mindsets have to change, a lot of processes have to change. Down below there is a lot of latent energy. It is just not channelized or tapped. So if you change the levers at the top, I think even small companies can overnight transform themselves and really give some of these big consulting companies a run for them. And really, we experience that ourselves, so we're fairly confident. And that's all. I'll be open to questions.
Couple of questions that kind of jumps down as you go through this. Questions are on two areas. One is on knowledge management. I think that's a critical thing. And typically in a consulting type of a mode, you need to have slightly different kind of knowledge management techniques. What is it that you're doing, and what is it that what has your journey been on that?
So I'll.
Is it people based? Is it systems based? And what do you do in terms of capturing knowledge at the end of an engagement, translating that into possibly thought leadership, etc.?
Sure.
What do you do?
So essentially, if I reframe the say, how do you codify that knowledge and disseminate it?
Yes.
Okay. So what we do is, we did not do this very good job earlier, but we have started noticing the importance for. We have what is called the post-harvest. Okay. So let's say we ran a simple segmentation exercise. We codify a lot of things which came out of that. For example, which are the right variables to segment on for the fleet industry in the US? So, okay. So we had to experiment a lot before we arrived at the 8 or 9 sets of variables. Okay, that is codified into a data model. You take the right, so that is knowledge codified, right? Now, then we have these things called exploratory data analysis. So we put a hypothesis and test the hypothesis. If it stands true, we confirm it. So all the confirmed hypotheses about the industry is again codified into what we call the hypothesis bank. Okay, so is there a correlation between X and Y? And if it turns out to be true, that is codified in the bank. So all the KPIs are codified, all the confirmed hypotheses are codified. So next time someone runs a segmentation model, he need not figure out what variables to segment on, what are the hypotheses, he need not go through the same thing. And
so
again,
you build the models and you keep them and have them accessible for anyone else who may need to use.
Correct. So we have got a separate platform codification group whose only charter is to go and dig out all the artifacts of every engagement, as much as possible codified and shove it into an IT system. So it's available in a portal.
And you
not fully possible, but there are certain things which you can't, but it's best we can do.
Do you find that you have regular contributions from people on the project teams into this, and people on the project teams, and this is not just a single point of contact that, there's one person who heads the codifying team, who's the source of contact to get information, and someone else to place it there as well.
Okay. So
is it an any-way interaction in terms of putting knowledge into the repository and extracting it?
Yeah, so we have a formal post-harvest and codifying it. The other things we started incentivizing that, of course. So in your annual appraisal, that is there. Then again, we have started this thing called the 360-degree appraisals, where people are evaluated subjectively on their readiness to share information. So even the guy below rates me. So all these things not fully, still there are people who are insecure with sharing, I would say, but these are some things we put in place, not fully functional, but yeah, some small steps we have taken.
Can I have a quick question? Yeah. You mentioned outcome-based contract. Okay. So just was wondering, what are the risks associated with outcome-based contracts, and was it easy to get into contracts which are outcome-based with the clients in terms of defining what are the outcomes which are resulted of what the work you are doing,
so the way we did it was we figured out early on that we can't go and sell outcome-based pricing to new customers at all. So any customer with whom we had at least 3 to 4 years of what we call the intimacy, then we go and say, hey, we know you for a long time, and we have delivered well for you in the past. Can we do it for you? We never went to a new customer and said outcome-based pricing. It will never work because a lot of intimate information he has to share and stuff like that. That is one thing. Only to existing customers where relationships have been built. The second thing is, we asked us if not all processes are, you can't go to outcome. So we asked two questions. First of all, is it quantifiable at all? Is the process quantifiable? Second of all, is the intervention we suggest attributable to us? No. And if we say yes and yes to all the three questions, yes, we have got good relationships, it's quantifiable, it's attributable, then we go and say let's go and do it. Otherwise, we will not do that.
How do you benchmark your practice against Infosys? Infosys got a very similar practice.
I have no clue about Infosys. That's why I said. But
Are they one of the competitors? Because Compound is also Infosys customer. So.
no, actually, the pie is so large. We are not really stepped with the Indian KPO providers at all. Most of the time, it's an existing marketing services company which is doing the creative part, offering the analytics, and then we are doing. Indian-based companies said, but whatever I've seen of Infosys on their website, the thought leadership is much better than ours. Okay, and the kinds of point of view articles they have, and the whole branding around that, I feel is personally much better than
One of
us.
the differences is we got into this thing of segmenting.
Correct.
Got focused on a few segments. I think that you're very thinly spread across a lot of
Yes.
domains.
Correct.
That may be one.
No, yeah, so very good question. So we asked ourselves a question in the first year itself. So do we focus and specialize on, let's say, banking and retail and leave out the rest? Or we go across? So most of us felt that we had to specialize because that seemed intuitive that you had to specialize. But our CEO had a completely different take on it. He said, no, let's cast a wide net, is what he said. We debated that in hindsight, I think that proved to be a much better thing. I was a proponent of the specialization thing, but in hindsight it proved out to be much better strategy because if you had just specialized, let's say in CPG and retail, which was our core area, a bank wouldn't have come to us and say, can you do valuations? We would have completely lost that opportunity. So I think, yeah.
Very quickly, what is the size of the practice?
Right now about 65 people.
Two questions I have. One is what the perception which I got is that you are into mainly syndicated research and analytics. Have you also tried into independent research and analytics? Basically, just like you took example of Yelp, you did on behalf of a customer. You analyze the data specific to a customer.
Correct.
Do you also think about doing independent research and sharing that as a service?
Yeah, so in the business plan, I would say it was there, that we have to do analytics and then offer research as an offering. But what we figured out was there's a lot more to do in analytics and stabilize before we go to that. So we're saying if it's customer-led, we do it.